Hey there, welcome to the start of my long weekend reading vlog. It's currently the Friday of the 4-day Easter long weekend, and I thought since I can't really go anywhere or do anything, nor am I expected to be online doing my job, I thought it would be kind of fun to have a reading challenge to keep me busy through the next 4 days. So I wanted to pick something small, something that is going to be challenging to achieve, but something that will hopefully be fun in the process. So I decided to go with a little bit of a Shakespeare reading challenge. So I'm going to try to get through 4 Shakespeare plays in 4 days. I'm really not sure how this challenge is going to go. I've never tried to read this much Shakespeare in this short of a time frame, so we'll see if this ends up even being enjoyable or possible for me, but I wanted to give it a try. So what I'm working towards this weekend is trying to finish up the Henriade cycle of plays. So there are 8 plays in the Henriade. They take up the majority of the works that Shakespeare wrote in the historical genre, and the Henriade cycle is traditionally split up into 2 tetralogies of 4 plays each. So I've already read the tetralogy including Richard II, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, and Henry V, and those were my first histories that I read by Shakespeare. I was worried that they were going to be so boring, and I liked them a lot. Now I need to read this second tetralogy, so this consists of Henry VI, part 1, part 2, and part 3, as well as Richard III. So I've heard mixed things about this series. The Henry VI plays seemed to be written earlier on in Shakespeare's career, so I've heard that they're not really his finest work, and they can be a little bit dull, and maybe not the greatest accomplishment of his writing, so I'm a little worried about these. However, I have been so excited to read Richard III for such a long time. I feel like I really need to have this Shakespeare play under my belt. It's referenced a lot. I've heard Richard III is a great villain, so I'm really looking forward to this one. So even if the first 3 of the Henry VI plays aren't all that exciting, I am hoping that Richard III will make the whole experience worthwhile, but we'll see how it goes. So my goal is going to be to try to read 1 play every day, so that means today on Friday I'm going to be reading Henry VI part 1. As you can see here, I have kind of 2 different editions of these plays. Usually I like to work out of these Pelican Shakespeare versions. Not only do they have really cute covers, but I also feel like it's just the right amount of notes in the text, because sometimes you read texts where there's just like way too much information on the page and it really slows down the reading. But I find that Pelican does a good job of explaining things that are genuinely helpful without really pulling me too much away from the story. So unfortunately, Pelican has only put out Henry VI part 1 in these editions. So for parts 2 and 3, I picked up this version by the Royal Shakespeare Company. I believe that this edition is kind of geared more towards actors and performers. You can kind of see that reflected in the notes. There seem to be a lot more stage directions, so I'm excited to giving these editions of Shakespeare a try. So yeah, that is kind of going to be the main focus of this challenge. I also thought, since we are doing a bit of a Shakespeare-themed challenge this weekend, that now would be a good time to pick up If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Now, this is a book that I'm really not sure that I'm going to like, but I'm still like excited about reading it at the same time. So from my understanding, this is basically The Secret History, where it takes this like group of tight-knit university students, except instead of classics majors, these guys are all Shakespearean actors. And of course, like The Secret History, there's some kind of violence or some kind of crime that throws everything off and creates a chaotic situation. So I'm really not sure how this one's gonna go. I know that the characters are like constantly spouting off Shakespeare quotes at each other. I don't know if that's gonna be cool or annoying, but I'm excited to give this one a try, and I will definitely let you know what my thoughts of it are as I am reading it. And then aside from all the Shakespeare stuff, I am also currently reading a bunch of other works. I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a little bit of a problem where I just read way too many things at once. But I thought I would talk you through a little bit of my pile of what I'm reading right now, so that if I refer to any of these books in the vlog, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. So right now I'm currently reading 2 French classics. One of them is Volume 4 of In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. And the other is Dangerous Liaisons by Chaudereau de Laclos. I am also currently reading and loving the Copenhagen trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen, and I'm about to start the final 3rd installment of this trilogy called Dependency. For fantasy, I am having a blast so far with The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. For nonfiction, I'm reading a biography of Alexandre Dumas' father, and this is called The Black Count by Tom Rice. And for some historical nonfiction, I am reading A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century by Barbara W. Tuchman. So I'm having a great time learning about all of the chaos of the medieval period in France right now. And lastly, I'm not currently reading this one, but I think I might like to get to it this weekend, and that is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This would be my first ever manga graphic novel, so that would be really exciting to try, and I just feel like I would like something creepy to read late at night. So this might be one that I pick up this weekend. So that's it for all the books that I am currently reading and the books that I hope to read this weekend, but I will update you once I've gotten started with the reading. Hello again. So it's 4:30 and I've just finished Act 1 of Henry VI, Part 1, and I'm enjoying this a lot. So even though Shakespeare wrote the Henry VI plays earlier in time, they actually take place following the events of the Henry IV and Henry V plays. So it's kind of picking up where we left off with these ones later in time. So now at the start of Henry VI, Henry V has just died, and they're kind of figuring out what's going to happen. France and England are all caught up in the drama of the 100 Years' War, and this is actually great timing on my part because I mentioned I'm reading this history book, A Distant Mirror, and this is covering more the start of the 100 Years' War. So it was kind of cool to be reading about this conflict from the beginning, and now in Henry VI, I can see that we're jumping forward much later towards like the latter half of the war. So that's kind of cool. Another aspect about this play that I'm excited about is that, if you can tell from the cover here, it features Joan of Arc as a character. So it's kind of cool. She's just starting to integrate herself with the French camp and starting to prove herself in battle. So I'm excited to see what they do with her character. So far we are off to a good start, and I'm excited to see some more battles going down in this play. Hey, so now we are a few hours later into the day. It's 8 o'clock. The sun is just starting to set, and I have been doing some reading in bed, and I've finished Act 3 of Henry VI, Part 1, and I'm still enjoying it a lot. There really are a lot of conflicts spinning in this play. So really, you've got this war that's going on in France, so you are kind of seeing the British perspective and the British soldiers that are fighting this war, as well as the French side, with Joan of Arc trolling around, causing a lot of mayhem. She is definitely my favorite character in this play so far, although I'm not appreciating all of the sexism that is directed at her. You know, people are either trying to like make fun of her for being a virgin or for being a slut. She's just being heavily sexualized in a way that I feel like isn't necessary. But anyway, you have those plots going on, and then you also have all of the Civil War stuff that's kind of brewing in England. So there are these conflicts with people around the king who are fighting each other, as well as we can also see the beginnings of some conflicts that are going to lead to the War of the Roses. So there's really a lot happening. I'm not sure that it's the most artfully handled how Shakespeare is introducing all of these new characters and conflicts. It can be kind of tricky for someone who isn't that familiar with this era of British history. There are a lot of characters just being thrown into each scene, so I'm not sure that he's doing the best job of this, but there still is a lot of drama and action. So I'm having fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this play is going to end. I'm not sure how much resolution there will be in Part 1 or how much this will just be expected to continue on in Part 2. But yeah, that's my update for now, and I will let you know what I think of this once I finish the play later tonight. Good morning. It is now Saturday. I meant to film an update clip last night, but I fell asleep pretty abruptly, so I had all these schemes of staying up really late. Only made it to 2 a.m., sadly. So I'm here today, this morning, to tell you about how Henry VI Part 1 ended up going, because I did finish this last night. So overall, I had a pretty fun time reading this play. It did keep me flipping the pages, and I was interested in the story. I think partly because there's so many conflicts that are happening in this play. You're flipping back between the war in France and then the conflicts that are happening surrounding the king and then the start of the War of the Roses. So there's a lot of things that are happening, which makes it a little bit confusing at times, but keeps the story fun. After reading this play, I'm especially interested in the character of King Henry VI, because at the start of this play, he's just kind of thrust into the role of being king, Everybody loved King Henry V. They're all still obsessed with him. And now we have this very young and inexperienced person trying to take on this role in a particularly stressful moment of history. And I'm not sure how young he is. I don't think it specifies in the text how old this character is supposed to be, but he's clearly not the hero of this play. Like, he doesn't charge in and fix situations. He kind of is just overwhelmed by things, and he relies a lot on the people around him. So that makes me worried that he's a character that is going to be easily influenced by some power-hungry people that are surrounding him. But it does make me intrigued to see how he is going to grow and develop as a ruler in the successive plays, so we'll see about that. I don't think he's remembered by history as being a particularly strong king, so I think there is a lot of misfortune still to come in this series. One thing that I really didn't like about this play was its take on the 100 Years' War was obviously from the English perspective, and it just went a bit too far into this like English nationalism thing, where it's obviously trying to play up the heroism of the English army, and it's also trying to ridicule the French characters. So they came across as pretty cartoonish, and I really didn't appreciate what happened to Joan of Arc, especially in the last 2 acts of this play. Like I was mentioning in my previous clip, she was my favorite character in here because I really liked the way that she was kind of using these different devious schemes to try to defeat the English. But I don't want to spoil the ending, but like in the last scene, Joan's character is just like exposed. So I don't really like how they slandered Milady Joan in this one, so that didn't quite work for me. Another thing that's kind of awkward with this play is that there are so many conflicts and battles happening that without seeing it, you know, when you're just reading it, you're just kind of thrown from one battle to the next, and it can kind of feel a bit choppy in that way. However, there are some great battle moments. One of my favorite lines came after a character is killed in battle and he's shouting at the other side because he's angry, and he says, "Oh, were mine eyeballs into bullets turned, that I in rage might shoot them at your faces." So, you know, there's some good lines in here, but you could clearly see Shakespeare hadn't, like, matured as a stylist yet. There were some awkward moments, and a lot of rhymed couplets, more than you'd find in his later plays, which gave it a kind of clunky feel sometimes. But still, for an early play, this seems like very ambitious because it's taking on a lot of history. So even though this isn't a perfect play, it is still quite entertaining, and it was pretty easy to flip through in a day. So I'm hoping that trend continues as I move on to Henry VI Part 2, which I'm going to try to tackle today. And then also, I was able to get through the first act of If We Were Villains, and all of my fears have been confirmed. Like, I knew kind of right away after reading the first section of dialogue on the first page that this is not going to be a book that works for me. This book is really making me cringe a lot. But at the same time, I'm enjoying reading it. So it's kind of one of those things where, like, I don't think that it's good. However, it is entertaining, and these characters are hot messes, and there's going to be lots of melodrama. So I think I'm going to keep reading it, even though it is giving me a lot of like difficult moments, especially whenever dialogue is happening. I compared this earlier to The Secret History, and it is reminding me of that in a lot of ways, in that the characters just are very clearly fictional constructions. Like, they don't breathe, they don't feel like regular humans, like regular college students that you'd meet. The way they talk makes you feel very aware all the time that they are fictional creations. I think a lot of my problems with this book can be encapsulated by the scene that happens near the end of Act 1, and they're at this college party that's happening in the woods, and the students are all getting drunk and disorderly, and they decide to play that game where you're in the water and like girls climb on top of guys' shoulders and they wrestle and try to knock each other off into the water. So that's like classic college party behavior. But then at the same time, the acting kids that are doing that are like quoting Shakespeare lines at each other to like taunt each other while they're fighting. So there's just kind of this weird like tonal discrepancy where on one hand I feel like I'm reading this like teen drama kind of story, and then on the other hand there's just a lot more Shakespeare than you would expect to be seeing in your typical teen drama story. So it's confusing my brain, but it's kind of fun. So I think I will be continuing on with this one, although I fully do not anticipate to like it all that much. So that's my update for today. I will check back in with you once I've actually gone and read some stuff. Hey, I'm here for a quick midway through the play update. This one has been quite compulsively readable. I've been really enjoying this one so far, although it's very stressful because I'm starting to get a little protective over King Henry VI. He is clearly just this sensitive little dude who is not equipped to be a king, and he's surrounded by so much treachery. So that is stressing me out so far because he is running out of allies. The enemies are just kind of forming these conspiracies with one another, and they are just getting closer and closer to making some real problems for him. So that is making for quite the stressful read so far. I still have 2 more acts to go, but I'll let you know what I think about it all once I'm finished later. Hello, I'm popping back in for another reading update while I chill out and drink my evening Dr. Pepper. So I ended up finishing Henry VI, Part 2. I was a little bit nervous about going into this one because I thought since it's like the middle installment of the series, I thought that it maybe wouldn't be all that exciting on its own. I thought it would just kind of continue the plot events from the first Henry VI, then maybe set us up for an exciting finale, but that really wasn't the case with this play. It was really strong and it had enough of its own action and intrigue to definitely stand on its own. Like I mentioned before, there is lots of stress in this play. You've got these lords coming together, forming these new factions, turning against each other, creating all of this drama and intrigue, making life pretty difficult for poor little Henry VI. So it was fascinating watching the political developments unfold in this play, and they have set things up so that I am very curious to see what's going to happen in the next installment. I felt like this play was a lot more focused than Henry VI Part 1, because that one you're just dealing with so many different locations and this huge cast of characters and so many events in the plot, which makes it exciting, but this one is more focusing on the characters. I feel like you get to go deeper into their personalities, and the conflicts have just become a bit juicier in this one. We definitely had more soliloquies in this one where characters are revealing their thoughts to the audience in a way that was very exciting. So I think this one does go deeper with the events that are happening and the insight into the characters. So I would say that this one felt more recognizably Shakespearean. And I also noticed there was an improvement in the language. This one just felt less kind of clunky and awkward and trying to do basic rhymes. It just felt much more recognizably Shakespearean, so I was happy to see that. So I'm happy to say that I am continuing to enjoy myself with this Shakespearean histories project, and I enjoyed dusting off this play, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Henry VI plays conclude tomorrow when I get to Part 3. So that's probably it for me tonight. I am going to try to make some more progress with If We Are Villains tonight, but I will probably check in with you again tomorrow once I've started Henry VI Part 3. Hello again, it's now Sunday afternoon, and I haven't done that much reading today. I've been pretty busy with trying to plan my online classes for this week, and I've also been trying to look for a couch to buy for our new house, and I hate shopping for furniture online because, you know, as a big reader, all I'm looking for is something that is going to be comfortable to sit on for hours at end, and you just can't test comfort level when you're shopping online, so that's been very time consuming for me. So anyway, I do have a few reading updates for you though. So last night before I went to bed, I stayed up late starting Uzumaki by Junji Ito, and this thing is actually creepy. Like, I bought it knowing that it was going to be like this horror manga, so I was expecting it to be sort of creepy, but it got creepy fast. So I'm only at page 75 and I'm already kind of horrified with what I read. So I'm not sure that reading it right before I was going to sleep was a great idea because it did genuinely kind of disturb me a little bit what I read. But I'm really into it. You know, I do want horror to get me on that level. So I'm liking this a lot, and I'm hoping to read more tonight. As for my Shakespeare reading, I'm getting close to the halfway point of Henry III Part 3, and I am continuing to really enjoy this series. Now, you can really see that this one is just picking up exactly where Part 2 left off. So I read in the introduction that they know that Parts 2 and 3 were written closely to each other. They don't know, however, whether Part 1 was actually written before Parts 2 or 3, or if it was kind of added on afterwards as some kind of prequel. So you can kind of see that 2 and 3 are much more closer together in terms of action and the events that are going on, and it is continuing the stress that we saw in Part 2, and we're continuing to see some more deaths of some of the key players in the story. I was pretty surprised that there was a pretty major death that happened right away in Act 1, so it seems like Shakespeare is not clowning around in this play. Like, we just got to business right away, and we just have to see this whole bloody civil war through. Still don't know what's going to happen to my boy Henry VI, but I don't feel good about it. He does just continue to be way too gentle and forgiving about this whole civil war situation, so I feel like that's not going to work out well for him. But I am very excited. We have met the character who will go on to become Richard III, and he is just this little vicious, brutal guy. So I like him a lot. So I think that bodes well for how much I'm going to enjoy Richard III once I finish this. But I will again check in once I finish this. And then we also need to talk about If We Were Villains, because this one has been giving me a really hard time. I knew after reading Act 1 of this that this was not going to be a book that I would ever really truly appreciate, but I thought that it could be like a kind of fun, trashy read for me. You know, I thought I could like enjoy flipping through it quickly and seeing how the drama would play out, but that's not really the case anymore. I'm not having fun reading this because I just don't like it. But I now only have 100 pages left, so I feel like I have to like see the whole thing through, but I really don't think that there's anything that is going to shock or surprise me in the past 100 pages. I have a pretty clear idea of exactly where I think this story is going, and it's just not working for me. The narrator in particular is really getting on my nerves, which was totally the case with The Secret History. Like, my least favorite character by far is the person who seems to be telling the story. So I've picked out a few moments for you to just highlight why I hate Oliver, the narrator, right now. So one of them is his poor attempts at humor. So this is a scene where they're at a party, and because they're sophisticated theater kids, they don't just like drink beer like your average college kids. Instead, they are always sipping scotch or whiskey or martinis. So this one girl's having a martini and she offers Oliver the olive from her drink. And he says, "You have it," I said, unable to suppress a smirk. "If I did, it would be cannibalism." So like, Oliver pun was brutal. Anytime that characters are making jokes in this, it has been pretty hard on me. Another thing that's bugged me about him is how the other characters are really like trying to set him up as like the nice guy of the friend group. So this is how one of his friends talks about him. "You know, everyone calls you nice," she said slowly, expression drawn and thoughtful. "But that's not the word. You're good. So good you have no idea how good you are." She laughed once, a sad, resigned sort of sound. So all the friends like see him as this great guy. Meanwhile, this is him interacting with his family when he's at home for vacation, and his parents have to confront him and basically tell him that his sister is dealing with a very severe eating disorder and they need to send her to treatment, and they won't be able to pay for both his tuition and her treatment. And this is how he decided to handle that conversation. "Let me get this straight. You're telling me I have to drop out of Delacour because Caroline needs some celebrity doctor to spoon feed her?" And I thought that that was just like an incredibly insensitive reaction to have, because it's like your sister, your family's going through this crisis, and all you can really think about is yourself and needing to be at school with your friends, even though you are such a nice guy and such a good guy. So anyways, those are just a few of the reasons why the narrator from this book is kind of giving me a hard time, so I'm rolling my eyes a lot. I'm not having a great time reading this one, so I'm hoping that I can just like burn through this one today so that I can move on with my life and so that my reading vlogs can just become more positive again. So I will check in with you again later once I have some more reading done. I just realized that it's 4 o'clock and I haven't had any tea yet today, so need to rectify that situation, but I will check in with you again later tonight once I have some more reading done. Hello again. It's probably about 24 hours later from when you last saw me. It's now Monday evening. What I'm learning about myself from this 4-day long weekend challenge is that reading a Shakespeare play a day isn't that difficult for me, but trying to film vlog footage for multiple days in a row is actually very challenging for me because I'm just not used to it, and talking to a camera at frequent intervals throughout the day is just kind of a little weird for me, and it hasn't been going great. So I'm sorry that I don't have more like frequent vlog clips for you, but more importantly, my reading this weekend has been going very well. I have continued to really enjoy the Henry VI plays so far. Last night I ended up finishing the Henry VI plays with Henry VI Part 3, and it's kind of a hard play to talk about without totally spoiling what's been going on in Henry VI Part 2, but I will just say that The War of the Roses has provided for lots of drama and entertainment, because in this kind of civil conflict you have people who are just like constantly switching sides, and they change their mind who they're going to be loyal to, so that keeps things dramatic. You also have a lot of action and battle scenes, and people are just killing each other left, right, and center, so this was a very satisfying play. If I had to pick a favorite out of these three, I'd probably say that Henry VI Part 2 is the strongest installment of the series here, although Part 3 was another strong contender, and the two of them clearly go together so well. Part 1 kind of felt like the weird anomaly, but there was so much interesting stuff happening in that one that even though it wasn't as well constructed, it was still a lot of fun to follow. So I'm so happy with how much I enjoyed these plays, and today I've been continuing on to Richard III. Now, this one is definitely the longest of all the plays in the tetralogy, so it is going to take more time and effort to try to finish this one in one day. However, I feel like I have lots of momentum and still a lot of excitement for seeing where the plot is going to go and seeing who's going to die and how it's all going to happen. I think that if I had just read Richard III on its own, it would be a really disorienting experience, because it's just so helpful to have read these Henry VI plays first, because you just get so much more of the context and the backstory and just understanding character motivation. It would have been so confusing to just get thrown into this world without knowing all of the things that have gone on before, because there is a pretty wide cast of characters in all of these history plays. Maybe that's because Shakespeare's audience would be expected to know more about important people from their own country's history, but on my end, not really knowing who these people are, it has been a bit tricky to sort who's who and kind of what side they're on, but I feel like I have a clearer picture of what's happening by the time I've reached Richard III, which is really helping me get into the story a bit more, since I'm not trying to like sort out who's who as much anymore. And I'm also really interested in Richard as a character, because he's just one of those fascinating villains. You know, he is very ruthless and he's very ambitious, and he just wants to be king more than anything. And, you know, in the Henry VI plays, basically all of the conflict for who's going to get the crown is coming from outside. It's coming from another family. But now we're seeing in this play, all the conflict is going to be from within the family as these brothers start turning against each other. Richard is coming across as someone who is extremely ruthless and power hungry. He's responsible for a lot of the demolition that we are seeing in Henry VI Part 3, and that is being continued on into this narrative. But what makes him compelling is that he is someone who is seen as a total outsider in his society. So, you know, even though he's in this powerful family, he is kind of someone that is viewed as different and other because of his physical appearance. He has a hunchback, he has some deformities, and all the characters in the play are really not shy about throwing that back at him and making him feel ugly and making him feel worthless. And he has a lot of really powerful soliloquies where he's like, what else am I to expect for in this life? Like, basically being king is one of the only things that is available to him to have a powerful, meaningful life, because he's someone who feels like he's never going to experience true love or family or all of those other nice things because he just feels rejected by his society a lot. So it's kind of interesting seeing someone who has that like bitter outside perspective, but yet he was also angling for a lot of power. So I'm only finished Act 1 right now, although Act 1 was long. It was like 50 pages in itself, so around 1/3 of the play. And there are a lot of moving pieces in place. Again, alliances are being formed, people are turning on each other, and I was pleasantly surprised to be introduced to a new favorite Shakespearean character who we met in Act 1, and he was called the Second Murderer, and he was sent by Richard to go kill someone important, and he had this like crisis of conscience when, you know, he's supposed to be doing the job and he starts getting these second thoughts, and then he starts talking to the person that he's supposed to murder, and he just becomes even more confused, and he doesn't really know how to get out of this situation. So there was something that was kind of weirdly sweet and wholesome about this interaction, because usually, you know, we're used to like all of these bloody deeds that just happen in Shakespeare, but there was kind of something cute about this crisis of conscience that happened, and there was a weird amount of morality in the scene, and it was interesting just seeing the perspective of being one of these like anonymous murderers that is like a pawn for one of the people in power. And I don't know, I really loved that moment. So I still have a lot more of this play to go today. Unfortunately, it's already like 6 o'clock at night. I got to a pretty slow start reading today. It's really like rainy and windy here today, so I thought it would be fun to go and take a walk outside today, since I figured there wouldn't be a lot of other people out. So I went on this really nice long walk. I was listening to some Neil Gaiman on audio. I'm listening to The Ocean at the End of the Lane right now, so that was a really nice way to spend an afternoon. But then I also had to like get my materials ready for my classes tomorrow. So that's kind of how we got in this situation where it's 6 o'clock and I still have like 100 pages of Shakespeare left to read tonight. But I'm still feeling optimistic that I can get through it, but we'll see how it goes. The last thing that I have to update you is that I finished If We Were Villains last night, so at least I don't have to spend time reading this today. I just really wanted to get it done. So for the positives with this book, I guess I will say that it was quite readable in that I read the whole thing in 3 days. Like, it is one of those fun books that you can just flip through the whole time. However, like you've probably been seeing through most of my vlog clips, I haven't really enjoyed the experience of reading this book. Writing like this just really isn't my style. It kind of feels more like the YA version of The Secret History. So I don't mean that to be like offensive, but I just found the writing style was kind of similar to what you'd see in some YA things, just the way the characters interact and stuff, and it's just not something that I really appreciate. Nor did I think that this was the most artfully constructed kind of story. Like, for example, the main character has to slowly piece together how this murder happened earlier on in the story, and the story relied on a lot of convenient coincidences. Like, there were 2 scenes in this book where Oliver is just thoroughly cleaning his dorm, and he happens to find these really condemning pieces of evidence for this murder trial. So just stuff like that just kind of fell together a little bit too sloppily. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I had a pretty strong prediction about who was responsible for the murder and what would happen after that, and I ended up being entirely correct, and I'm not usually good at guessing stuff like that, so if I can figure it out with a lot of confidence, that's probably not great. So because of that, and a few of the other reasons that we've been talking about along the way, this book just didn't end up working out for me. I know that it's really popular though, and it has a pretty dedicated fan base, so I'm glad that there is an audience for this book, and that it can get people excited about the power of Shakespeare and theater, because there definitely is a sense of that magic in this story, and I do appreciate those moments where you can really see how gripping performance is and being an actor and like channeling these powerful stories. So I kind of like that it exists, but just from my end, it didn't quite work for me. Even though I am quite Shakespeare obsessed, it still seemed like a bit too much. So this one wasn't quite a successful read for me, but it was still a fun thing to flip through this weekend. So yeah, that's kind of it for me right now. I will talk to you later once I have finished reading Richard III. Hello, welcome to Tuesday. The long weekend is now over, but I am happy to say that I did finish reading Richard III last night before I went to bed, though it was past midnight, but I still think that fits within my 4-day parameter. So yeah, I ended up finishing this Shakespearean tetralogy over the course of this weekend, and Richard III was probably my favorite out of the plays in the tetralogy. It was a really strong finish to the story that was being told. So I knew going into this one that Richard III is well known as being one of Shakespeare's finest villains, so I had my hopes really high, and I will say that he did not disappoint me as a very evil individual. And usually I'm someone who is kind of secretly rooting for villains. I kind of want them to win at the end of the day, except Richard III is like so bad that I was actively rooting against him in the final battle, and that doesn't usually happen to me. He's responsible for so much bloodshed throughout the course of this play that it can be almost difficult to keep track of all of the characters that are getting the axe throughout the play, especially since a lot of the murders are taking place off stage. I would say that compared to the other plays in the series, this one feels much longer and more slow-paced. There's a lot of build-up in this one, a lot of tension, a lot of things happening off stage. It did take me most of the day to work my way through this one, so it is really dense. And it's just not quite as fun and compulsively readable as I found the Henry VI plays to be. However, with this one, I would definitely say that it's weightier in theme, and it leaves you more to think about once you've finished the play. I'm particularly interested in the concept of conscience, as it's been developed through some of the characters in this story, so that's something that I want to continue thinking more about. 3 things that I really loved about this play that I'd like to quickly mention before I wrap up this vlog. One of the things was that this play was really funny because there's a lot of great asides that are taking place when Richard III is acknowledging his evil schemes to the audience, and he's kind of trying to act like he's this nice guy to the other characters on stage, although many of them don't buy that act. So he's not the most convincing or charismatic kind of guy, but anyway, he'll make some statement that is like heavily ironic and has this really dark double meaning and will turn to the audience, and I really liked those moments. I also really liked the character of Queen Margaret. She's King Henry VI's widow, and she just is kind of like lurking in the background of a few scenes where the other characters like don't notice her, and she makes all of these ominous, shady comments. She's basically cursing all of her enemies. She's so bitter about losing the throne and all of the misfortune that has befallen her, and she's just gleefully sipping up all of the misfortune that's brewing in this play, so I thought she was really creepy and I liked her a lot. More than I did in the King Henry VI plays, where she is not a very nice wife. The third thing I really liked about this play is the scene that takes place before the final battle. So it's the night before battle, and Richard III is basically being haunted by the ghosts of all of the people that he has killed and done wrong throughout the series, and I could just really picture this being on stage. It's so dramatic to have these ghosts coming through, and they're basically cursing Richard, and they are giving good fortune to his opponent in the battle. And I don't know, I could just picture that scene really well. I thought it was neat. It kind of reminded me of like a Survivor finale when you've got the final jury, and it's kind of like all of the people that you wronged in the past can now come back to haunt you. Like, it reminded me of that, like your bad vibes are now being turned against you. So I really liked how that was done. And the final battle scene itself was also pretty intense. Usually when I'm reading a play, I have a hard time like picturing the fighting, but this one was quite dramatic and I had a lot of fun reading it. So yeah, this was a great culmination to a really nice series, actually. I did not expect to enjoy these plays as much as I did. So that was a real bonus. So I am really glad that I spent my time this weekend reading so much Shakespeare. It's now Tuesday, and I can't help but feel like there's something missing in my day so far because I haven't read any Shakespeare. So overall, it was a really lovely way to spend my long weekend. I really liked reading so many of those history plays all in close succession. It helped me keep track of the plot and characters, and it never felt too burdensome. Like, I never felt like I was not enjoying myself reading those plays, which was really lovely. I was, of course, a bit less successful when it came to reading If We Were Villains, but even though I didn't enjoy the story, this is a book that has been sitting on my shelves for a few years, so I'm glad that I read it, and you know, even though the story was not the greatest, we can all at least appreciate this cool dark skull cover, so at least there's that. So yeah, that's it for my reading vlog. Thank you for sticking through with all of my meandering if you've made it this far in the video. Let me know if you read anything good on the long weekend, and I will talk to you again later. Bye!